Hey soldiers, millions of Americans are facing eviction. Another subset of Americans, they aren't even being allowed to control the climate in their own homes. We're going to talk about the importance of ownership, okay? We got to start looking at this thing a lot different and wresting control back from a power structure that is doing everything in its power to quash, to eliminate the middle class. Do you know Emmanuel Macron, the president of France? I believe that's the position that he holds. He might be the prime minister. I'm not familiar with French politics. If you're one of our viewers from France, correct me. But anyway, Emmanuel Macron came out and he said that the era of abundance is over.
Firstly, because we are witnessing, and not just since this summer, but over the past few years, the end of what we might have seen as abundance. And for those who enjoyed it, it is also the end of a carefree time.
And part of the reason for that he gave was because, well, got to give money to Ukraine. One of the leaders in Germany pretty much said the same thing. Said we got to, tweak this whole thing for the green agenda. So abundance, that whole era is ending. Now, do you think it's going to end for him? Do you think it's going to end for the political leadership in Germany, America, Canada? No, the target is set firmly on the poor and middle class throughout the world. So we're going to talk about how you can recapture the reins here and wrest control from a group of people who do not want you to be on the road to financial independence.
You want my property? You can't have it.
Okay, so as I said, what? Hey, what? Hey, who are you? I'm you from the future. I've seen the video and you forgot once again to tell people to like and subscribe. Could you do that, please? Subscribe. Share this video. Seriously, help us out with the algorithm so that we can spread the message of financial independence. It's so vital in this day and age. We've got subscribers, believe it or not, all over the world, on every continent except Antarctica. So help us out, spread the message. Let us, put this thing out there so people can start to take back control. All right, let's get into the first story from Zero Hedge. The median rent in the U.S. Now, we talked about this last week. The median rent in the U.S. is just over $2,000, about $2,100. Now, of course, in some places, it's going to be higher. In other places, of course, it's going to be lower. But the median is around $2,100 per month. While the CPI cooled slightly in July, of course, that's the consumer price index, that inflation number, shelter costs rose another 0.5% month to month. Now, if we're talking month to month, that's hitting those folk that might be out there in a situation where they are renting on a very short-term basis. There are a lot of people that do that. But even if you're on that annual rent, we showed how that is up 31% year over year. That's extreme, okay? On a yearly basis, shelter costs have spiked. Overall shelter costs have spiked 5.7% according to government numbers. And the CPI drastically understates the cost of housing. Of course, it understates the cost of everything. In many calculations, it doesn't even take into account food and energy, the two most frequent interactions you have with the economy on a daily basis. With rents skyrocketing, households representing 8.5 million people are behind on their rent, according to the Census Bureau. Of those, 3.8 million say they are somewhat or very likely to be evicted within the next 2 months. Now, that's frightening, okay? Because we've got the holiday season coming up, and typically after that, the economy slows down a little bit. So we're starting to see more and more layoffs. Gannett, which is a media company, they laid off 400 people here recently, and we're very tight-lipped about it. And it finally came out. So we're seeing those layoffs. We've seen layoffs at, announcements anyway, at Tesla, at Amazon, all over the spectrum. Okay, so we're starting to see more layoffs. So these individuals who are facing this situation, They're in a situation where when you rent, that's just, if you don't pay that in 30 days, then hey, that's headed to rent court. It's going to be adjudicated and we'll see. But most of the time, if you have to pay your rent, you're going to be subject to eviction. The combination of soaring inflation, the end of most eviction moratoriums, and the end of rental assistance payments, and combine that with an extremely low vacancy rate, and we see that it's pushing a lot of the renters out. All right. Nearly half of all renters experienced rent hikes in the past 12 months. And that's not unusual because typically if you're in that year-to-year lease, it's going to increase on that next year. That's just clockwork. That was the situation in every rental situation that I was involved in early in my life. According to the Census Bureau, 11% have seen rent increases of over $250 per month. Now, we know that wages are not going up that fast to, accommodate that type of hike. So what can you do? We'll talk about that in a second. Let me give you another example. These clients of this energy company, they have been put in a situation where they got these fancy schmancy thermostats, that the smart thermostat. The smart thermostat ended up making them look stupid. 22,000 customers of Xcel Energy in Colorado were locked out of being able to control the climate, control the thermostats in their own homes because of some emergency that was declared by Xcel Energy out there in Colorado. Now you might ask, well, how does something like this happen? Well, a few years ago, they came through my neighborhood and they said, hey, we got this new smart thermostat. It's going to be great. We're even going to knock some money off of your bill if you basically get this smart thermostat. So, you know me, I'm asking questions. Turns out that the smart thermostat gave them the ability to control my climate in my house. They could manipulate it based on spikes in energy. And if they felt that, it was too much, let's say my neighbor doesn't get it and I get it. So it's 100 degrees and he's over there chilling, okay? And they cut me off because he's maxing and relaxing. Me, I'm down here sweating, okay, like a pig, all right? Miserable because I gave them the authority to control my climate destiny. No thanks. Tony Tallarico, an Xcel Energy customer from Arvada, Colorado, told KMGH-TV that he attempted to turn up the air conditioning as temperatures creeped into the 90s on Tuesday, but was greeted with a message from his thermostat declaring energy emergency and prevented him from turning the dial, okay? So see how smart that thermostat is? It said, no, we got an energy emergency, buddy. You opted into this, so hands off. Go and just sit down and drink some water, and you'll be fine. Now, to what extent could this happen in the cold weather? Now, you know cold kills a lot more people than heat. That's why more people live around the equator than at the poles, okay? Or as you start to get to the higher or lower latitudes, you find fewer people because we need that warmth, okay? There are only so many blankets you can put on. But how does this equate to ownership? Look, don't give anybody control over any aspect of what you do, okay? And renting is kind of ceding that control. Now, look, I rented for a long time. I know that some people have to do that, especially if you're young and you're starting out, okay? I get it. But work toward ownership. There has been a lot of dialogue in this country over the past few years about, well, the American dream of owning a home, that's not for everybody. Well, if you don't own, you've got to live somewhere. And if you don't own and you rent, you are subjecting yourself to an ever-increasing equation in rents. Now, mind you, it's okay for BlackRock to own. Okay, they're buying up residential properties, Blackstone as well. It's okay, all right? And I applaud them. Do what you got to do. But don't tell the middle class that it's not, ownership. That's questionable. First of all, God forbid you fall behind on your mortgage. I'm not suggesting, what I'm about to say is not designed to have you think that you're paying your mortgage is optional, but things happen. And if you fall behind on your mortgage, there's a hell of a lot more latitude in terms of when you pay that, okay, than there is with a rental situation. Sometimes evictions, or foreclosures rather, sometimes foreclosures can take many months, up to a year, sometimes. That all depends. I'm not saying that's the case in every case. But the other thing about owning, and this is something you will not get from a rental situation, you're not going to build any equity. You're not going to be able to realize the appreciation of value in that property. And you're not going to be able to take any of the tax deductions on a building that you rent, okay? You're also not going to be able to, at some point, realize some of that equity and maybe do other things in life with it. Like, for example, maybe you want to make improvements on the property to make it even more valuable, potentially. Well, you've got that option depending on, how long you've been in the property and a lot of other factors. But it's an option that could potentially be available to you. It's not available to you when you rent. So ownership is a way to go. Now, I know that there is a concept called control, don't own. That is more of a concept that's geared toward people who own businesses, okay? And it has its merits, definitely. And we'll get into that in a subsequent video. But for now, just understand that owning your home and not giving anybody control over your thermostat, or here's another situation. I recently called to try to figure out why my car insurance was so high. So last year, there are a lot of winding roads in my neighborhood, okay? And last year, I had a situation where there was this piece of metal. It was a big piece of metal in the road. And I had a choice. I could either go off into the woods, okay, because it just came up out of nowhere. It was a blind curve. Boom, there it is. I could go off into the woods. I could go into the opposite lane, which a UPS truck was coming, and I could, be grievously injured at best, okay? Neither of those situations was going to work for me, so I ran over the metal object, and what it ended up doing was it tore my oil pan. So I called the insurance company, filed a claim, got it fixed, paid my deductible. I had this thing called a good driver record or whatever. I've never had a point on my driver's license. So, okay, I paid the deductible. I'm moving on. We get the renewal. They've hiked our insurance. They've taken away the good driver. And I called them and I said, well, wait a minute. How do I fix this? Because I'm a great driver. I didn't hit a UPS truck, right? I didn't wreck the damn car and have you all be in a position to have to pay that by going off into the woods. They didn't care. So they say, hey, look, we got a proposition for you. If you get this little device in your car and it'll allow us to track you and your driving habits, then we'll reduce your premium. And I said, hell no. You already know how I drive. I don't have a point on my driver's license. Again, I drive a Volvo wagon.
What kind of black man drives a Volvo?
A black man that appreciates safety.
I am not a speed demon, okay? So I said, no, you're not getting into my life like that. There was a provision in that thing that said they didn't want to see you driving after 12 a.m. I'm like, who the hell are you guys think you are? My parents when I was 15 years old? Okay, so seriously think about all of this new technology and how it promises you all of these wonderful benefits that, they try to attach some monetary value to it. But at the end of the day, do you really want to give up control? Do you want to give up control to a landlord who, look, I'm not knocking him. He's going to be in a position, or she, to have to evict you if you don't pay your rent, because that means they can't pay their mortgage and they're not going to go into a foreclosure situation for a tenant. That's just ludicrous. Another example I'll leave you with before we get out of here is I used to go to this cleaners, okay, near me. And I went in one day with a armful of clothes about a year ago. And she said, sorry, can't take it. I'm closing. My landlord, and this woman had been there in this spot for at least 20 years. I've been going to her for almost that long. And she said, I can't take you because I got to close up shop. My landlord increased my rent by $3,000 a month. I can't pay it. It was obvious the landlord was trying to push her out because he had, or she, or they had better prospects in terms of money. Now there's an Enterprise Rent-A-Car there. And I believe that they own the building in back too. They changed that from a Goodwill to a Foot Locker. Okay, so that's the way the cookie crumbles, people. Now put yourself in the shoes of the landlord who just opted out of a low-performing rent with my dry cleaner to a high-performing, very reliable rent with Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Who wouldn't take that deal, right? Own. Okay, guys, now at this point, I want you to take a look at this video. We talk about as the housing market falters, Bank of America has a new product. It may work for you, but there's some questions about it. So take a look at the video, learn more. Remember, guys, own. I'll talk to you soon.